Today we brought the Lose Change Camaro to a chassis dyno shop right down the street from our shop. It's called Larry's Electric, and our mission today is to break in the car. GM has a very specific procedure on how to break in one of these new LSA engines, where you bring it up to a certain RPM and hold it, let it coast down, and do this a few times. So we're not going for an absolute total power number today. We'll probably wait until we get some miles on the car before we do that, but we just want to make sure that all the systems are functioning properly and that the engine is happy. And so far, it seems to be happy.
When we took the car to the dyno shop, there's a few things that you have to do before we actually data log the car. Obviously, we got to get it out of the trailer, get it on the dyno, and once the car's on the rollers with the brake set, we strap it down, and that's usually up to the dyno shop to make sure it's to their standards. Once the car is strapped down, the car's brakes are released and the dyno's brake is released, and we roll the car, make sure it's centered. We usually roll at 5 to 10 miles an hour, just basically idling in first gear. And we'll run the car through the gears, warm up the engine, because you never want to be pulling hard on a cold engine. And this car had not seen any street time at all, so we wanted to make sure that the transmission was happy, the rear end was happy. And then once everything seemed all right, we were ready to do our data run. To do the data runs, we set the dyno to what's called a road simulation mode. So you input the car's weight, and then you input a grade in percentage, like a hill, so that you can run the car through varying loads, but not necessarily have to go through full throttle and do a power pull. What we want to do on this car, since it runs mass air for its primary calibration, is stabilize the airflow and watch what the fuel trims are doing. See how much the ECM is trying to compensate for the tune being incorrect. Once the fuel trims are stabilized at a certain RPM, we'd step up another 500 RPM until we'd gone to about 4,000. That allows the tuner to look at how much the ECM is changing things to try and get it right and adjust the air curve to match so it doesn't have to work so hard. The owner of Lose Change had another friend who does a lot of tuning, and he trusted him to do the tuning in this particular case, but he lived in Michigan. So in order for him to tune the car, he needed data. So we used HP Tuner's data logger function to record different operating conditions of the car, which were then able to email to him so he could adjust the tune and email back to us to put in the car. So up until we had the car running, it had been on some plain steel roller wheels. We do that on just about every build because the wheels that go on the car for final assembly are generally very expensive, often very hard to repair if something happens, especially these because they had a satin gunmetal metallic gray middle and a brushed hoop with a satin powder coat on them. So if you scratch them, there's no way to fix them without reconditioning the entire wheel. The reason we did not have the Forgeline wheels on the car up to this point was because of the Wilwood brakes. They're very large and none of our steel roller wheels would fit over them. But in order to run the dyno, you have to be able to steer and stop the car, which necessitated putting on the Forgeline wheels for final assembly. Forgelines were also wrapped in Toyo R888 tires, which is a very sticky compound tire to make the best use of the horsepower and the Detroit Speed suspension components in this vehicle. The car ran really well. Even with the aftermarket cam, it idles very smooth. Obviously, we didn't do much to beat on it, but it sounded healthy. The road simulation does give you a bit of a power output. You can see how much horsepower the car is theoretically using to climb whatever grade of hill, and everything pointed towards this thing making plenty of power. As far as the interior of this car, basically nothing was stock for a '69 Camaro.
A big part of what this car is all about is not just looking flashy and going fast. The customer wanted to be comfortable. Although it doesn't look like it, there were some upgrades made to this interior that were designed to kind of blend in.
A vintage air system using factory vents and controls, so nothing looks out of place there. This car we did not put a console in, but it has a chrome Hurst shift lever and a white Hurst shift knob, so everything looks very period correct there.
We put a lot of sound deadener in this car. The carpeting had to be custom cut to fit between the wheel tubs. The seats were a stock rear '69 Camaro seat that had been reupholstered in leather to match the front Recaro seat. This car also has a 5-point racing seat belt because it is basically a road race car for the street.
It also had new Relics power windows, which comes with '69 Camaro style window switches.
The roll cage got painted black and the headliner was installed above the cage, but we retained things like an intelligent rear view mirror, and it also has the sun visors. And believe me, integrating sun visors into a car that's got a roll cage is a little bit of a challenge, but the crew was able to pull it off.
All the restoration parts that were stock style stuff for the 69 Camaro, dash pad, A-pillars, the headliner, the door panels, all that stuff came from Classic Industries. One of the things the owner didn't like about a stock 69 Camaro is how dark they are inside, because you have one little dome light and two little kick panel lights, and no console in this car, so we didn't have a rear courtesy light. We chose to add some LED lights up to the front of the roll bar up by the windshield and hid the wires coming through the headliner. So when you open the doors, there's this indirect lighting that actually lights the car much better than the factory dome lights did. We also put LED light bulbs in the factory equipment to brighten them up a little bit.
The windshield and the rear window were both flush mounted without a polished stainless trim, again giving it a modern appearance, but was still unmistakably 1969. Pretty soon it was time to do the final sanding and buff process. This car used a 3M system which used polishing compound and then buffing compound to bring out that finish to a really shiny mirror-like finish. One of the cool things about this car is the colors are so high contrast. You've got the very deep black and the Mars red, and the trim on the car is mostly body colored. We did add a darkened tail panel section in a charcoal gray, which eventually matched the wheels that we were going to install on the car. The bumpers are kind of special on the car. They were narrowed in steel and made to fit the car body better, and then we painted them body color. And this was done for a couple reasons. One, body color bumpers on a Camaro reflect the original optional Enduro bumpers you could get back in '69, which were a flexible bumper. These certainly aren't flexible, but now being body color, they don't stand out like a chrome bumper. And they add a little bit of a modern flair to a car like this that's mostly monochromatic.
So if you're passing by this car at a car show, you really have to get inside and look at it before you notice how many things had actually been changed.